Welcome, everyone, to Beyond Surviving, the safe space for survivors of childhood sexual abuse to receive support, resources, and share their stories. Beyond Surviving is about freedom, healing, connection, and even laughter and fun. Most importantly, it's about letting go of the pain of abuse and finally moving on. I'm Rachel Grant, and for those of you who don't yet know me, I've been a sexual abuse recovery coach since 2007 and am the author of Beyond Surviving, the final stage of recovery from sexual abuse. You can learn more about me and the Beyond Surviving program at rachelgrantcoaching.com. Now, for those of you who have been listening to the podcast for a while, you know that I love to bring dynamic, badass women into this space, and Lyvonne Proverbs is no exception to that rule. I met Lyvonne back in October at the Courage Conference, and she is a woman who, when she walks in the room, the energy in the room changes. So we are going to be so blessed, and we're going to have a great time here as Lyvonne shares with us healing techniques for survivors, advocacy tips for allies and co-conspirators, and ways to move forward to address trauma and foster resiliency. I want you to know that Lyvonne is a New York native, a New York City native. She is a body and sex positive preacher, a pastor. What? Did I really just use all of those words in one sentence? I did. That's one of the things that I adore and I admire about her. She's really changing the conversation in faith-based communities. She's a transformational speaker, a spiritual life coach. She's a writer. She's a poet. She's an educator. Oh my gosh. And a conscious creative social entrepreneur. On top of all of that, this woman is an Emmy award-winning media producer, and she graduated from Seton Hall University, and she also went to Yale Divinity School. She went to Columbia Theological Seminary, where she completed her thesis, The Problem with Father, God, Incest as a Silent Killer in the Black Church. It's all about preaching, poetry, and sexual trauma. She is also the founder of Beautiful Scars, an online storytelling agency focused on trauma, healing, and resiliency. And her At Worst Surthrivors platform is a digital community for Black Christian women who are also survivors of childhood sexual abuse. So, in other words, I am damn lucky that I got her here to talk to me today because she has a lot of shit going on in her life.
Hey now.
Welcome, Lyvonne.
Thank you so much, darling one. I'm really glad to be here.
So I am wondering if where we could start today is you talking a little bit about your journey. I'm so fascinated by this thesis work that you've
Mhm.
done and your own, like how that your own journey with incest has really informed and influenced the work that you're doing. So maybe you can tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and how you've arrived to be where you are today.
Yeah, I invite folks to take a deep breath and lean in. If you need a moment to gather yourself, because we're going deep real fast, do what you need to do for you. Because my life story has taken on a whole new trajectory since I started therapy and really started to turn my wounds into wisdom. I realized that this culture of silence has just permeated family, church, and society. And the only way that we are going to end childhood sexual abuse is by sharing our stories, telling our stories, and of course, holding perpetrators accountable. And so, as an incest survivor growing up in church, where we use family language, we use kinship language, right? We talk about how we're brothers and sisters in Christ and we are God's children and we are spiritual family. I was conditioned religiously to believe that family is supposed to be kind and compassionate and loving. But
Yeah.
because I was being sexually abused by my biological father, there was cognitive dissonance. There were two very different realities. The reason why I was valedictorian in sixth grade is because school became my safe haven, right? My teachers were my protectors. And the folks who were supposed to protect me were actually my first perpetrators. So there was a lot of unraveling that I had to do around religion and my body, particularly as an incest survivor. And so I'm grateful that I have been able to take a dig deep into all of that.
Mm-hmm.
interrogate my faith and my belief system, develop spiritual practices that speak to the woman that I am now, and move in such a way that I can help other survivors overcome their traumatic stories and also help communities to support us much better than they have been in the past.
Yes, yeah, it's a process that seems to be ever evolving, particularly in faith communities where, we have such a strong tradition of silence and keep it within the community. I remember when, the abuse came out about my grandfather, he was a Jehovah's Witness,
Mm,
and my mom went to the elders of the church, and then that was that. It was like it went into this like black hole, like what? Just like disappeared, and like what, and nothing was ever said, nothing was ever done about it, and no further conversation. And luckily, we are starting to see a lot of that changing.
mhm,
Something that really struck me from what you said there is, in the context of faith communities where we do use, that language that you were talking about, brother, sister, kin. I never really framed it fully in the sense of like how conflicting that layer will really be for somebody who's also experiencing trauma at home.
And that's the thing that, really opened my eyes to just how pervasive child sexual abuse is
Mm,
that the fact that perpetrators are typically people that we know, love, and trust, right? They're family
yes.
members, friends of family, teachers, coaches, pastors. And so even though this person may not be biologically related to you, there is a spiritual or social relationship there. And so incest has a more expanded definition when we include just people who are in our circle. And so
Thank you. Yeah.
many of us struggle, right, with trusting ourselves with men if they were the perpetrator, or women if they were the perpetrator, or people in positions of power. We sometimes don't trust ourselves to discern, is this person a safe space for me? And so
Yeah.
that's some work that we have to do to remind ourselves that as we age, as we engage in our healing practices, to own our power. And that's why I love the work that you do, helping us to reclaim our body and our physical space is what helps us to reclaim our mental and our spiritual space and our expansiveness and our bigness in the world, because we deserve to take up space, right? Yes, that
Yes.
little girl, that little boy wants to shrink, doesn't want to be seen, because if I can shrink myself, maybe
Mm-hmm.
see me, right? Then
Yes.
as an adult, you're like, maybe if I shrink myself, then I won't bring criticism, or I won't bring any type of negative energy. But it's like, no, the more you bloom, the more sun you get, but also the more rain you get. And so as we grow and expand, we become more equipped to take on more attention. And hopefully it's healthy,
Mm,
non-toxic attention that helps us grow through
yeah.
all of this.
Yeah, this whole process of, being able to be seen, following trauma, feeling like we're even connected into our body, like we even understand what does that even mean? I was just talking with my clients last night about how, when your first introduction to your physical sexual self is violation, then
Mm-hmm.
and you associate a body with like pain or violence or
Mm-hmm.
objectification, or okay, but this is your vessel, right?
Right.
And so
Right.
how do you continue to walk out into the world and connect not just with yourself but with other people in that
Right.
space? So that shrinking energy is so strong,
Right.
and you are anything but shrunk. So,
Oh.
so give us some of your like your inner guidance with that. So we have the theory and the idea about
Yeah.
how to take up space and be that, but
Right.
what in practice has that really looked like for you, Levon?
That's so good. Unlearning toxic religious dogma has been critical for me. I know that childhood sexual abuse is something that transcends religion, race, socioeconomic status. And I know that this is not just happening in Christian churches, that it's
Yeah.
happening in Jewish synagogues and Muslim temples and other sacred spaces, right? And so
Yes.
often religious spaces do not have holistic conversations around our bodies. And this is actually what I'm writing about right now, is
Ooh.
that we have been bifurcated between our bodies and our spirits for long enough, and now it's time for reintegration. So I know that there's going to be some sort of religious or social conditioning around the body being inherently bad or evil, something that must be controlled, particularly if you're in a woman's or
Mm,
female identified body, right?
exactly. Yes.
Extra layer of misogyny, the ingrained hatred of women that we have to resist, particularly in patriarchal religious spaces where the masculine form was deemed good and the leader, and the feminine form was deemed bad and something to be mindful of or afraid of, right?
Yes.
And so this kind of warped sense of the feminine is something that we have to unravel, because then we can see that in our feminine body and our power, in our, hips and our breasts and our uterus.
Mhm.
We still have them intact in our stretch marks and in our jiggly bits on the back of our arms. We begin to love every part of ourselves. So
Yeah.
realizing that the creator made me, and my body is beautiful and a gift, and everything that my body does naturally is god given, that has been just instrumental for me, and that has led me to affirming myself, right? Doing
Right.
affirmations in the mirror, looking at myself naked after I get out of the shower, and taking the time to get some shea butter or some coconut oil and massage it into my skin and just say, I love you, wrist. I love you, elbow. I love you,
Mhm.
knee, right? Like the parts of ourselves that don't typically get a lot of attention, or the parts of ourselves that we can be unkind with.
Right.
I have loved my cheekbones for forever and my clavicle for forever. But, I'm like, my tummy's a little fluffy. I'm almost 40 now. Okay. It's not like when I was 17 and
Right.
it's not supposed to be. And so,
That's
yes,
right.
fluffy tummy, I love you too, because you keep my core intact, and that helps me to walk. And
Yeah.
walking helps me to run, and running helps me to do my work and show up fully in the world. So, just loving on our bodies. Other things that I like to do, because we live in the 21st century, is curating our timeline. So if I follow someone and I see them and I don't feel good about myself, it has nothing to do with that person and everything to do with what's going on with me. And so I mute them temporarily, or I unfollow them completely
Beautiful.
until I am in a place where I'm like, I see this person and I see the beauty in them as reflected in the beauty in me, and I can celebrate this moment and double tap or comment and keep it pushing. And so that's been really helpful. And then the last thing, well, last two things, I recently cleaned out my closet and I got rid of everything that didn't make me feel regal or sexy. Like those were the two aesthetics I was
Yes.
going
Those were your
for.
themes. Oh, I love
Regal or
that.
sexy. And it was like, it has to go. And I took everything to Buffalo Exchange, and they gave me a 50% store credit. And so I just went shopping for stuff that was new
Mm.
to me. Bought this badass red jumpsuit that just like hugs my hips and my booty
Woo.
perfectly. So excited to wear that. And then I spend some time, and I do this every day now, just dancing in the mirror, putting
Mm.
on some tunes that lift my spirits and keep my vibrations high, and loving the way my body moves, especially because I am the one moving my body. Because
Yeah.
I am the one exploring my body, which definitely takes us to another layer of sensuality and sensual ownership.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well,
Beautiful.
something that I'm really connecting to from what you shared there is the underlying kind of, I think, theme of what you just said is the space of like, you got to be with your body
You
in
got to.
order to take up space.
You got to.
Yeah. There's
So
this, go
go
ahead.
ahead, Rachel.
You go.
I was gonna say, so many of us dissociate from our bodies because of
Yes.
the childhood sexual abuse. We
Yes.
if I'm in my body, then I'm gonna go back to that time. And there have been times where I have been dancing to my favorite reggae, soca, and calypso music in my dining room, and I do have a flashback to an incident with my abuser.
Okay.
And in that moment, I honor it and I say, Lyvonne, I'm so proud of you. You made it through this moment, and look at where you are now, and you are safe now. You're not in
Mm-hmm.
that room anymore. You're not on that bed anymore. And I come back to my body immediately. So it's not to say that you're never going to be triggered or you're never
Right.
going to have another flashback, but there's just something about being mindful in the moment and reminding you that you are safe. That's really important to me for being in my body.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge so many of us face when healing from trauma is separating past from present.
Hmm.
Because the brain can doesn't really have time the way that the
Right,
mind does,
right.
and so we can very easily get our wires crossed and be back
Hmm.
in a moment. So I loved even the languaging you just modeled there, like the way that you talk yourself through those moments. Like, hey, I'm not there. I'm not in that bed. I'm here in
Yep.
my home. I'm safe,
Yep.
what is present, what is real right now.
Yeah.
And it takes effort, it takes repetition, it takes
Yes.
attention and awareness, and even
Yes.
I think sometimes willingness. I think there's a
Mhm.
little bit of easiness that is actually there. And I say
Mhm.
this with love, everybody who's listening. But what I've known from my own journey is that I can throw a pity party like the best of them,
Hello.
right? And
Right.
so I have to sometimes be willing to draw a line and say, nope, not today. I have to pull
Not today.
myself out of that because nobody else is gonna. I'm the only one here. It's just me and my thoughts.
Listen, so that is something that my therapist helped me process through. Shout out to Dr.
Mm.
B. Where would I be without him? But she helped me to realize that as an incest survivor, I grew up feeling very entitled. I went through this traumatic experience. The world owes me X, Y, and Z. She was like, baby girl, the world don't owe you shit.
Hmm.
And when I let that sink in, I was like, yes. So, fam, your woundedness may not be your fault, but your healing is absolutely positively your
Yes.
responsibility. And so that sounds, I think, harsh or callous depending on where you are in your healing journey, but it's actually really empowering because it means that
Right.
you have resources, you have access. It means there is something you can do to begin or deepen your healing journey. And so that is good news, right? At the time of this
Agreed.
recording, this is Good Friday. We need some good news.
It's
This
true.
freaking global pandemic.
Oh my gosh.
And it's
That's
that
right.
this collective pause, this collective time where we get to breathe and go inward and do our shadow work and work with Coach Rachel and work with Coach Lyvonne and work with Coach whomever your spirit is feeling attracted
Yes.
to really unpack what you've been running from. We've been working 9 to 5. We've been working our 5 to 9. We've been getting these degrees. We've been going out on dates. We've been creating YouTube channels and never really doing the hard, gory, grotesque work of healing. Because
Mm.
healing is not sexy.
No, it's messy.
Will make you sexy.
Yeah.
But we got to get there. And so I'm just unfolding to the
Oh,
to the
I love
to
that.
the journey. Yeah.
Healing will make you sexy. That is like a quote of the day.
Listen, people think
It's so
healing is like,
true.
oh, I'm going to Bali and I'm going to be in the coconut milk bath with the pretty flowers. I'm going to get a facial and massage. Now, don't get me
Mhm.
wrong. I love a good spa
It's
day.
nice.
Like,
Yeah,
I
it's
I
nice.
actually picked off my gel manicure. My manicurist, when we finally can see each other, she's going to be like, man. But anywho, I need to paint my nails, girl. So I'm here for it. But healing is actually going into the deepest, darkest depths, the most silenced and suppressed and repressed
Yeah.
parts of yourselves and calling it up in community. Now, I'm not telling you to do this alone, right? Have your
Yeah.
cabinet of support. But to honor the grief, the anger, the rage, all of the emotions that we as, good girls or good boys or good children
Mm.
are not supposed to express. But there is plenty good room for your anger and your rage, and you have every right to be angry.
Yeah. Well, I second all of that.
Hmm.
W- When you were sharing about that place of like the going into the deep dark,
Yep.
I can remember a time in my life where that felt completely unreasonable. Like I would be sitting listening to you if this was like my 20-year-old something listening to the podcast. She would have been
Oh,
like, I
for
would have been
sure.
like, delete right now, like turning it off, not
Right.
listening any
Yeah.
further. Like, what do you
Next.
mean? And
Right.
I think to reiterate, a really important thing you said there is that this is not dive in all by yourself. It
Correct.
is find who is going to be your mentor and your guide
Yeah.
to help you lean in. But at the end of the day, it is a part of you getting to that place where you're so sick and tired of how
Hmm.
your life is that you're
Hmm.
willing to take that jump.
Absolutely. You come to that moment when you are ready, right? No
Yeah.
one can push you into that. I remember before I really deepened my healing journey, I'd just gotten accustomed to sharing my story. And it got
Mm.
to the point where that was the first thing that I would say to people. Like, hi, my name is Lyvonne. I was sexually abused by my dad for 5 years as a child. I was like, wait a minute. So
Mm.
over time, because that part of my life had been suppressed for so long, it was
Yeah.
almost like once I peeled back the top, it was like a geyser. Like everything it just had
Oh
to come out
yeah. Oh yeah. All the time.
all the
This is
time.
the main
And
thing I
then
got to talk about. Yep.
slowly over time, it became a part of my story as opposed to the definition of my story. It became a part of me, but it didn't define me. So there are times where I do work and it doesn't come up. And
Yeah.
it's not to say that it doesn't matter in my life or I don't want other childhood sexual abuse survivors to know that I'm in it with them. It's just that I also know that there are steps to
Yeah.
get there. And I can't just come in and bulldoze you and expect you to be able to share. Some
Mhm.
people have healed and will never share their story.
Right.
Some people are just healing and want to scream it from the rooftops. And wherever you are on the journey is completely fine.
Yes, yes, yes. I remember that moment in my life too, where it's like, oh, I don't have to be silent about this anymore. Great. I'm gonna like anybody and everybody. You
Right.
about to have a
Hey, you.
lesson
I was
on
abusing this
trauma.
kid
Woo!
at the bus stop.
Yeah. One of the things we talk a lot about in Beyond Surviving is that, we're not meant to experience trauma as a life sentence. And that really the bottom line objective in my work with my clients is that these experiences of trauma become a thread that is a
Hmm.
part of the tapestry of their life. For those of you who are
Hmm.
watching the video, right, this beautiful tapestry that's right there behind you, it just really resonates with me because it's like, yeah, you see all the layers and everything that makes up that construct of this tapestry. And when we're really really stuck in that trauma, it's like the light is being shown just on that part of our life.
Hmm. And I think there's something to be said about those spotlight moments, right?
They
Where
need to happen, but we
they
can't get
absolutely,
stuck there.
but you don't want to get stuck there. But especially because as children, we felt so invisible, we felt so silenced. And so now our adult selves are like, you're going to see me, you're going to hear me.
Mhm.
And it's like,
Mhm.
yes. And when you have the spotlight on you, when the microphone is in your hand, what are you going to say? Are you just going to spew from an unhealed place, or are you going to offer some sort of medicine from your womb? Are
Mm.
you going to be able to transmute, right, that energy where we are spiritual alchemists taking
Yes.
this horrific, horrifying
Mhm.
event in our life and saying, even in spite of experiencing this, I have healed to the other side. Here's how I did it. Here's how you can do it. It
Yeah.
will look different because we're different people, but it is possible. And I think that's the hope that we offer is possibility.
Absolutely. Would you say that's kind of when you talk about the medicine of the wound? By the
Mhm.
way, fabulous.
Yes.
Yeah, like, would you say that that for you is that hope, or is there something else layered in there for you? What is the medicine that you feel like you now have the opportunity to offer other people as a result of the abuse you've experienced, Lyvonne?
Yeah, that's such a juicy question, Rachel. I think the hope that I have to offer is that living your fullest, most joyful, most pleasurable life comes from radical self acceptance and self love. And
Mm,
you cannot love what you do not give attention to, and you cannot heal what you don't reveal. And so, the longer that you resist honoring your truth and your survivorhood, the longer you are delaying your very full, pleasurable, joyful life. Because you cannot it's not a hurdle. This is not a race. This is
right.
you cannot skip over it and just try to get to the next phase. The only way through it is through it. So you got to get into that cave and you got to take out whatever
Mm.
tool you have and chip away at it bit by bit. Because the moment you think, okay, I've dealt with my rage, here comes I've dealt with my betrayal. Here comes
Yeah.
my rejection. I've
Oh,
dealt with
yes.
my,
Here's your
every
next
time
lesson.
I'm on
Mhm.
the phone with my therapist, I'm like, I feel really strong today. I'm in a great place. We're just gonna kiki like we're at happy hour. And then it's like, nope, here comes a bit of unworthiness.
Yeah.
Nope,
Yeah.
here comes a bit of self-sabotage. So child is always something.
Yeah. I think that's a really powerful message to offer, which is that, hope and possibility is not the space of like, oh, I'm just going to like do this little beautiful checklist and then life will be rosy and sunny for
Right.
every single day,
Hmm.
because life keeps happening, challenges keep
Yeah.
arising. We can find other layers of ourselves. That
Right.
doesn't mean we always have to be digging around to try to find it, but if it's
Sure.
showing up if it's presenting to you, then there's a real opportunity to just up level and take it up another notch. And I think in many ways that's maybe, well, you tell me. I love when I saw you present at the Courage Conference, one of the first things you talked about was this, beautiful word that you've, manifested of Surthrivor.
Yeah.
And it super resonates with me, of course, because the concept of beyond surviving, I think, is in the
Absolutely.
same lane. But tell us what that really means to you.
Yeah. So when I was in grad school, I was studying Christian social ethics and Black women's issues. And when you look at the numbers, of course, white women, Asian women, Latinx women were all being affected by it. But I discovered that upwards of 70% of Black women are sexually abused before they turn 18 years old. And so when I thought about just how many women that is, I realized that I had seen Black women starting businesses, getting degrees, doing the best that they could without having like safe, carved out, protected space to process through all of this. And so, like, this word survivor kept coming up, and I was like, I'm supposed to identify as a survivor. This is what the research is telling me. I was like, but I'm in seminary full time. I'm an acclaimed spoken word poet. I have deep, beautiful community. I was like, I'm not surviving. I'm thriving. I'm flourishing. And I was like, huh. I'm a surthriver. So a surthriver is a person who flourishes despite facing life's harsh, extenuating circumstances. And so I invite you, your listeners, to self-identify as surthrivors. I think it pushes us beyond the conversation where folks are getting like, hashtag Me Too fatigue and
Mhm.
hashtag Church Too fatigue.
Mhm.
That being labeled a survivor can be another sort of re-traumatization of
Yeah.
sorts. Where
Yeah.
people, oh, you're a survivor. Like, well, excuse me, maybe you should be flabbergasted and exasperated with perpetrators and rape culture.
Amen.
Maybe that's where you should direct your energy. But to say
Yeah.
that I'm a survivor, again, it feels very empowering. It feels very
Yeah.
hopeful. It feels very forward thinking.
I
And
agree.
that's the dream, that even though life started out really shitty for us, it
Mhm.
doesn't have to stay there. And I am not a betting woman, but I assure you that it won't stay there if you are willing to do the work.
Yeah, I think it's almost literally impossible to stay there if you are
Mhm.
willing to do the work, if you lean in, and you find the mentors and the guides who can really speak into your life
Right.
and bolster you and keep nudging you along and
Yes.
kicking you in the ass when you need it.
Yeah.
All of those things.
Yeah.
And you're right. I had a similar dissonance, like, ooh, I don't really like that. I'm just like, who wants to like survive their life? Like, that
Yeah.
doesn't sound appealing at all.
Right. Not at all.
Yeah.
No. I don't
So,
think that's why we were put on earth. I don't think we were put
no,
on earth
no.
to drudge through 20 years of schooling, to drudge through 40 years of some cubicle job, to, savor a bit of life as a retiree and then die. Like,
Yeah.
we were put on this beautiful, magical, majestical earth, to steward it and each other. And so
Mm,
that's why I think this moment is so critical, because Mama Earth is healing herself. I think
yeah.
if you have the resources and the wherewithal, that now's a great time to heal yourself. I realize that this sheltering in place is not safe for everyone, that there are women and
Right.
children who are trapped in homes with their abusers. I realize that there are some of us who do not have homes to shelter in. And so I think it reminds us that we have to protect the most vulnerable and marginalized
Hmm.
among us. And sometimes the most vulnerable and marginalized among us is the little child that's still living inside of us. And
Mm,
so if we're feeling triggered, if we're living with anxiety, I'm diagnosed with PTSD, like, just getting through a day is enough. If you thought about taking a shower today, it's a win.
yeah,
If,
exactly.
I didn't tell you
Yeah.
you had to take the shower. You just,
You just have to think about it. Hey, I know,
no,
I know.
I
It's
don't
so
feel like it.
true.
Cool.
It's so true.
No problem.
This is a really important piece of the puzzle that you're conveying here, is that healing is not grand, big, huge leaps. It
Right.
really is those daily little
Yep.
moments, the daily accounting.
Yeah.
And that is what ultimately adds up to
Yeah.
shifting into this space where you reclaim your life.
Right.
Yeah.
And you reclaim your life by reclaiming your agency, right? You realize
Correct.
that my body is mine. In
Yeah.
religious spaces, we're taught that it belongs to this divine being and that we are not
Mm,
ourselves. We are taught at young ages that we're supposed to listen to adults and go give your uncle a hug, like even if you don't really
right.
want to. We're conditioned to believe that we have to do what other people say with our bodies, and that is not true. That is false. Um,
Mhm.
your body is your body. And so when you're in your body, if you have working faculties, if you're healthy, you can see, you can taste, you can touch, you can smell, you can feel, and so activating your senses is going to be a helpful step on your healing journey, because if you surround yourself with things that taste good, nourishing food, things that
Mm,
smell good, delicious oils for your body, or that look good and smell good, like beautiful flowers, you surround yourself with beauty, you start to become beauty, you start to desire beauty, and then you start to desire pleasure and getting in touch with your wants and your needs, because it's not just about sexual desire, although sexual desire is amazing, especially when you come into your own and you've healed
yes.
beyond sexual shame. um, but I mean, just knowing what brings you joy. I ask
Mhm.
myself multiple times a day, every single day, what would bring me joy right now? And
Yeah.
I do that thing, right? My
Yeah.
partner was like, "Are you drinking water out of a wine glass?" And I was like, "I absolutely am, because this brings me joy." So
Right.
that's what I'm doing. Um, and so thinking about what brings you joy is counterintuitive to social conditioning for women, because we're told to put other people's needs before our own. And when you really are selfish and you say, what would bring me joy? What would make
Mhm.
me happy? Some of us are uncomfortable with lavishing that kind of attention on ourselves.
Yeah.
But I don't want you to be like a woman that I met at one of my keynotes in Minneapolis, who shared this story where she had 4 children and she loved cooking breakfast for them every Saturday, and then they would spend the day together. Beautiful, right? Just like a gorgeous family ritual. And
Mm.
she's like, it wasn't until my last child went to college and I was going to make eggs one Saturday morning when I realized I didn't know how I liked my eggs made.
Right.
For years, she had been making eggs the way her children liked them. When
Mhm.
they weren't there, she didn't know, well, how am I supposed to make these eggs? Can you imagine going through life not knowing how you like your eggs?
I know, right? Yeah.
Something that seems so simple, but
Wow.
indicative of how she was so focused on everyone
Interesting.
else's needs and desires that she
Right.
didn't even give herself the time to figure out that I like them scrambled, or I like them over
Mhm.
easy, or whatever. So know how you like your eggs. Start there.
Yes,
And then
Lyvonne.
build from there.
Oh, it's so real though. So many of my clients come into the work with this idea of like, I don't know who I am. I don't know who I am. And I'll simply say, do you like coffee or tea? And they're
Hello.
like, what do you mean? I'm like, do you like coffee
That's
or
so
tea?
good, Rachel.
They're like, I like coffee. I'm like, great. You know who you are, at least as far as coffee and tea.
You're
Like,
right.
our essence and our sense of who we are, we can make it this really big, like airy fair. Like, no, it's just like, what are your preferences? What brings you joy? What are your likes? What are your dislikes? That is it seems so basic. Isn't that just too simple? But
Mm,
I think at the end of the day, that really is, in so many ways, the heart of who we are. The things
right.
that we love, the things that matter to us, the things that we care about. I often sometimes say too, like, well, what pisses you off? That'll tell you about who you are too,
Hello.
right?
Absolutely. And I think that absolutely has something to do with religion and society, right? Making us feel like there's some great big thing out there that
Ah,
we have to work to get closer to. And it's like, no, actually, it's to go inward, right? Oprah talks about getting silent, getting quiet, and listening, and just saying, hey self, what do you like? And
mm-hmm.
figuring out from there. Everything that you need is already on the inside of you. You just have to listen. You just have to remember. That's our job. Our job is to get quiet, to listen, and to remember, because our abuse helped us not helped us our abuse caused us to forget. Our trauma causes us to forget. Our
Yes.
trauma causes us to run and be busy, so there's a lot of noise, a lot of chatter, a lot of clinging it, like that static.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know if this happens anymore, because you remember we had real TV when we were growing up. And like you
Yes.
turned to a station where there was no visual. It was just
Nothing. Right.
right. So child,
Yeah.
they don't know that. But
Well,
that
we're
kind
dating ourselves a little bit, but that's okay. Y'all can Google it. You can be like old people TV, and then you'll find out what we're talking about.
of okay. I heard you're not fine until you're 40. So I'm like, I'm on track. And you can know
Hey.
how old I am.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
But yeah, so we have to get still enough to
Yeah.
allow the quiet to wash over us. And
Yeah.
I know that in those moments, hard things are going to come up, but it's coming up because it's time for you to release it.
Powerful. Lyvonne, we're going to take a quick break and
Okay.
then we'll be back and talk more about allyship. And I want to hear more about your organization, Beautiful Scars. We'll be right back. Are you fed up with missing out on life because of fear and anxiety? One of the hardest aspects of being afraid is that the fear and anxiety takes on a life of its own. A single moment becomes a defining moment. One person hurting you becomes a fear that everyone will hurt you. Our fears and anxieties are not to be taken lightly. They can be so strong that they immobilize us. But there is a way out. And during my 60-minute masterclass, I'm going to share with you the keys to unlocking the cage of fear and anxiety so that you can finally do the things you love and obtain the things that you want in your life. Go now to rachelgrantcoaching.com/fear-class and download your MP3. Now, back to our show. Welcome back, everyone. So, Lyvonne, one of the things that I know is really dear and near to your heart is supporting people and understanding how to be allies. I love this word co-conspirators as well.
Yeah,
I'd love for you to lean into that and break that
sure.
down for us a little bit.
So I stole co-conspirator from one of my dear colleagues, Michelle Kim. She does multicultural work in the Bay Area, particularly around anti-racism and anti-bias and work like that. And so when we think about allyship, ally is such a flat word. It's a noun,
Mm.
it just kind of lays there. Whereas a co conspirator is one who actively carves out space for marginalized voices. And when they have the mic, they don't speak, they pass it to someone and amplify their voice. And so I feel like co conspirators use their privilege. They call out systems of oppression. They don't put the onus on survivors to continually be the ones coming to the forefront to say, hey, let's raise awareness. Hey, this is a problem, right? They carry a large portion of the work. And so for me, I prefer co-conspirators to allyship because it's active, it's ongoing, it's systemic, and it's a selfless expression of love and concern for your neighbor. So that's where co-conspirator came from.
Wow, I love that. Every time I talk to Lyvonne, she expands my vocabulary. It's
Listen,
so good. I remember over drinks at Chili's after we were
yeah,
celebrating. After I was like, Break this down for me. What do you mean by
hilarious.
pandemic? What do you mean?" And now here we are. I'm like, "Oh, look, now I have a perfect example of what
And,
it looks like with this."
right,
Yeah, but it's really powerful because words do matter.
they
They
do.
shape and frame the conversation. So when we frame sexual trauma as a pandemic, and then when we think about solutions and how to address that as bringing together people as co-conspirators,
Right.
you're right. It totally changes the energy and the intention of what we're doing.
Absolutely. And when I think about language and the words having power, it makes me think about the power of storytelling, which is so critical because statistics don't always change people, but stories do. And
Yeah.
there's also a flip side to that that gets me a little irritated sometimes, Rachel, because I'm like,
Mm.
how many gory stories do you have to hear before you honor that this is a problem? Like, why
Yeah.
do you have to hear testimony after testimony of adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse before you're like, oh my gosh, this is a problem? Like, at the
Good
time of this
point.
recording, it's April, it's Sexual Assault Awareness Month, it's Childhood Sex Abuse Prevention Month. But the fact of the matter is that we know the numbers and we know that the numbers are low because it's so underreported.
Yeah.
So you just don't care about children, is what you're telling me. You don't care
Ooh.
about girls and women. Like, we
Mm.
don't need any more research. We need
Yeah.
people to end rape culture and patriarchy and stop protecting perpetrators. That's what
Yeah.
we need. But I also realize that perpetrators are typically people in power. And so if you
Yeah.
them, then your power is going to be shaky. And so now we're rocking with we're messing with the
Ooh,
status quo.
it's a
Status
whole
quo don't like
system. Yeah. I think that, when people say like bringing down the patriarchy, right? That's a little bit of what you're talking about, is breaking apart those systems
that. Right.
that allow these sorts of things to perpetuate.
Exactly.
But what it takes to break it down is a total disruption of what people who are privileged take
Yep.
as, like, wait a minute, I'm going to have to give up something here,
Right.
and that's going to take something from them that maybe they're not yet willing to give up. And so, how do we keep pressing against that,
Hmm.
even so?
And that's the difference between equality and equity, right? Equality is cute.
Correct.
It's like, oh yeah, everyone gets the same. And it's like equity, like, no, everyone gets what they need. And
Yes.
that means some of you have more than you need, so you should not have as much as you have. And that's
Yeah.
where things get tricky for folks. And that's why I think with everything that's happening with COVID-19, like we are seeing the radical disruption of white supremacist capitalism, right? We're
Yes.
seeing mass disruption of productivity and people living to work as opposed to being creative human beings who are in community and have just what they need, right?
Mhm.
Like there's literally only so much money you can spend at a certain point. Like,
Yeah.
okay, now, come on, you just don't need that much. And so
Right.
I'm delighted that we're seeing that the system isn't serving us, that the system
Right.
isn't sustainable, that we might look at capitalism as just a way of life, but not realizing that capitalism is actually fueling childhood sexual abuse because you
Mhm.
have this system where it's set up where you have to make money in order to survive in it well. And then the stress of earning money. And then
Mhm.
the people who are sick, or who are pedophiles, who are rapists, right? Like if they figure out how to get ahead in the system,
Yeah.
then they're going to be protected by their money
They're
and their
shielded.
status.
They're totally
Precisely.
shielded.
Precisely. So it's all interrelated. And so I'm just hopeful that when we heal to the other side of this global health crisis, that there will be a complete change where we will be able to live in a more just and equitable world.
Mm. Yeah. Fingers crossed. Double, double, double.
I know.
Because something has to give.
Something has to
Something
give.
ultimately has to give. It really struck my heart when you were saying, like, how much more research do we damn well need? I think that's a really powerful place to go, in the sense of, it really needs to stop being about trying to figure out what is happening
Right.
and do something about it.
Right.
The
When
interventions, the systems that need to change. Go ahead.
Yeah, when I think about my work around Beautiful Scars, which I
Yes.
launched officially in 2018, and the title was taken from a blog where I was just talking about stories and really hard life issues. I don't think there's anything that's taboo in my world. I think the English language will go wherever we go if we
Mm,
just have the courage to go there. And so I realized that I was hearing so many stories from so many different people. I mean, Rachel, as a fellow survivor, as a fellow coach, like sister coach, like I would get my nails done. 45-year-old white woman, yeah, my uncle. Have lunch with a 33-year-old black guy, former football player, my buddy. Yeah,
mhm.
my coach. And I'm just like,
Right. Yeah,
why
there
am
isn't
I
any
hearing these
corner
stories?
you can find where it's like abuse free.
Everywhere. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter race, gender, creed. It doesn't matter.
Yes.
It's everywhere. And I'm like, the fact that it's everywhere and we're not talking about it, I'm like, that does not compute. So
Mhm.
being able to have to resource stories for folks who are willing. Some survivors find that it's helpful to share their story. They feel empowered. They feel like they have the control, that they're not being silenced anymore. And so I also know that other people find strength in knowing that they didn't go through this alone. Some of us, when we are abused as children, we think
Right.
the only person in the
Oh
world
my
who's going
gosh. So
through this,
true.
which is why Tarana Burke's Me Too movement it was just so pervasive and so
Mhm.
popular because we're like, actually, most of us, as a Black woman, most of us have gone through this.
Right.
And so Beautiful Scars has been an avenue for Black Christian women in particular to say, this happened to me. Um, and I want to do something about it, but maybe I don't know what. But it starts with just saying, this is the truth. Because for so
Yes.
long we repress and suppress and try to forgive and forget and let go and let God and all this really toxic ideology. It's not even
Mm.
ideology.
Mm. Mm.
Because you can't forgive without acknowledging the
The
wound.
pain. Oh my gosh. Yes.
Yeah, forgiveness is inherently confrontational. And so I don't think we should be pushing women or men or people of faith to forgive something when we haven't even created space for them to be believed in the first
Oh
place.
my gosh. Isn't that the truth? We don't really care about what happened. We don't really even believe it happened. So, but go ahead and forgive and let this guy, or woman off the hook. It's such a culture of bypassing the
Hmm.
person's pain because they are not ready to face their own pain. They're not ready to handle it. They're not ready to
Accurate,
actually dig into those conversations and deal with
accurate.
it. Mm.
Accurate. And so for me, I realized that, particularly as a religious leader, that I could not be in a pulpit or a sanctuary every single Sunday lifting up childhood sexual abuse. I was like, you know what? I'm going to have to do this outside of parish ministry. And that's why
Mhm.
I took to new media because, first of all, the internet. Why not bring your message to a global audience from the comfort of your home, so people
Yes.
to have a beautiful home. And so I realized that I could create a digital community where people would have some semblance of anonymity, and they would be able to share as much or as little as they wanted. It wasn't like in front of an entire church, or it wasn't at a big rally. It's like,
Yeah.
DM me, or you can send me a note anonymously, or but you get it out.
Yes.
So much just
Yeah.
getting it out is just such an important step in our healing. And so yeah, I just love
That's
creating a
amazing.
community where we can bring the best of our religious backgrounds and integrate it with our newfound spiritual practices and create just this beautiful mosaic of sacred space that speaks to us culturally, spiritually, and socially.
Yeah. And I have deep appreciation that this space is for Black women because I think there's first of all just a lack of resources period for people of color,
Mhm.
and that there are very real layers of trauma that Black women are going to be processing and
Yeah,
working through that just quite frankly people who are not people of color are not dealing with.
right.
So I think that's powerful. And one of the reasons why I really wanted to highlight Beautiful Scars and At Worst or Thrivers, because for those of you who are listening, who are looking for a space like that, I mean, don't even wait a second. Like, pause this, go to the webs, figure out where Lyvonne is. I'll have all of it in the show notes where you can connect with her because you do not want to pass up on having Lyvonne in your life, having
Uh-huh.
her guidance, having her support, having her wisdom, and helping guide you through, things that, quite frankly, a white chick from Oklahoma just can't. So, so do that, okay?
Right? I appreciate your honesty. You got to know what's your lane and what's not. And then when you
Yes.
realize something is beyond your area of comfort or expertise or what have you, experience, have a list of resources available, right?
Right.
Like, I know that I am a woman of color, but there's a particular nuance in the Korean Christian church, right? Like, I'm
Mhm.
a woman of color, but growing up with abuela, right? I'm not
Thank
Puerto
you.
Rican, I'm not
Yes.
Boricua. Like,
Right.
I know that there are different cultural nuances. So yes,
Yeah.
I think as women, we have to have these like really big gathering spaces. But I also realize that in those spaces, sometimes there can be passive aggression, there can be
Mm.
racism, there can be, just not kind interactions in,
Right.
among
Yeah.
women of
Yeah.
color and non-women of color, particularly Black women, and non-Black women of color because of anti-Blackness in our culture. So like they're just like you said, so many different dynamics, and so I think it's important that you just find multiple spaces where you feel fed, right? Like maybe
Yes.
there's something with folks who, identify with the gender you identify with. Maybe there's something
Yep.
that's racial. Maybe there's something that's ethnic or cultural or religious, or you like baking. I don't know, knitting,
Yeah.
whatever it is. Do something where you feel find your tribe is what I'm trying to say.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. We can be fed from many rivers.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, absolutely. Take from me what works and what helps and
Mhm,
soothes and serves, and then take from Lyvonne, and then find
mhm.
other safe spaces to
Yeah.
to layer that in. I love that so very much. Oh my God, I literally could just sit here and continue to talk to you and talk to you and talk to you. I feel like I need like Lyvonne part one, two, three, and
Oh,
four.
thank you.
You are just such a beautiful powerhouse woman.
Thank
You
you.
are divine, and I just always feel lifted up and encouraged and inspired whenever I have the gift of being in your presence. So, thank you. It's been such a blessing to have you here. Do you
Aw.
have any final words, offerings for our listeners today?
Yeah, absolutely. So, darling one, I want you to know that I see you, I hear you, I acknowledge you, and I believe you. And what happened to you was wrong. It wasn't your fault, and you didn't do anything to deserve it. The divine is pissed about it, and so am I. And I just am so delighted that you are listening to this message, that you are listening to spirit. If that's something that your belief system includes, whatever is nudging you right on this
Mm.
journey, I invite you to lean into that, to trust yourself. You are trustworthy, you are worthy, and there is so much beauty waiting for you on the other side of
100%.
this.
Please go check out Lyvonne at lyvonnep.com.
Yes.
And I'll also include the links to the other resources that we've talked about today in the show notes. And just thank you, everybody, for tuning in, for listening. You're so appreciated. You can also pop over to rachelgrantcoaching.com to check out the resources there, learn more about sexual abuse recovery coaching. And please be sure to subscribe to the podcast, leave us a note, leave us some comments, and then come back next time because we have so much more to share. And until then, take good care of you.